Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Hope you're all well. We're looking ahead to the next weekend of Allianz League hurling action, and also the AIB Club final is on this weekend. Local derby between Ballygunner and Ballyhale, from either side of
the Battle of the Ballies.
Yeah, from either side of that disputed Kilkenny-Waterford border. So it should be a good one. They have recent history as well. So we'll have a little chat about that. Joined by Rory as always. Anthony Daly is back with us. He's like a bad penny, can't get rid of him. And Conor Neville is here as well.
Seen a lot of you this week, mate.
What can I say? I've got a magnetic personality, Dale, or something along those lines. We were talking on Monday. We were having a good laugh about the Limerick Wexford result and how it was more of your era, Dalo. And I went looking this morning to see what I could find in terms of Limerick results. Mainly because I don't want people to think I do absolutely no research for this podcast. I do.
Google is an awful thing.
I do on occasion do a trawl through Wikipedia. So in 2017, Wexford won 14, Limerick 14 points. Same venue, same time of the year. These two teams can nullify each other. I was looking, but I found a match in 2011 where Limerick only scored 2-9. It was okay though. Clare scored 6 points.
6 points.
Yeah,
we're bad enough facing into you the weekend now, Mike, without reminding us of that.
Yeah, so that was a Gerald Auckland's day. That wasn't a
what time of the year were these games?
Yeah, this is what I'm getting onto. Is just that this time of year can really throw up some freak results. And then you have to go back to March 2010. Say the dark days of the Limerick Revolt and the B team being played, etc. When they lost to Tipperary 224 to 8 points. I think that was the last day of the B team. Nicky Quaid was playing wing back on that team. That was the one thing I found interesting about it.
I think the Dubs gave them a fair hiding. I remember I was in the side.
It wasn't a good league for them.
We had to win. You know, it was that bad. If they happened to turn up in Parnell and beat us, they'd have put us down on the head-to-head. We'd won no other game. So you were nearly putting out your championship best against Limerick's 14. So
days. Yeah, dark days. But it just because you always think winter hurling, it's the 111 to 11 scoreline. But in a way, I would say that the Waterford Dublin match the other weekend kind of also epitomised winter hurling, Dalo, in that there was plenty of scores, but the ball wasn't moving too quick. There was a lot of rucks. There were 17 cards. Lads were getting to know each other. The ball wasn't moving as quick. So there's several ways to describe winter hurling. But it got me thinking, maybe who were the guys you came up against, or the guys you played with when there was an R in the month's name? You were happy enough to have them alongside you.
Yeah, I used to love those 3 rounds before Christmas. Mikey, they were, to say the least, they were very sociable. Like an away trip to Wexford might mean a return journey on a bus, a CIE bus on Tuesday, maybe. You know? So, and it was nearly acceptable as well. And but of course, look, you're never as fit as the modern guys. You know, we were always putting on ledger and. Yeah, geez, our backs, like in general now, with the exception maybe of Frank Lohan, but myself and Dyler definitely, and I used to winter well. And yeah, sure, look, we great battles with Limerick at that stage. I mean, ourselves in Limerick, whether it was in Ennis or in the Gaelic grounds, would draw a massive crowd. I think 25,000 there at one stage, one of the years, in 97, you know, so, and a couple sent off, and a good bit of sledging and stuff with Hula and Clarkey and all those greats. But in general, I think the forwards hated it, you know, because they were probably more nimble, and the backs loved it because the ball would be stuck in the muck. And too many pitches now, Mikey, are too well drained and sand based and all that now. It was better. The natural sod was better. I remember before we made the breakthrough. I remember Mark and Teddy McCarthy one day in the old Park Keeve, and like to say he had little interest in the match was an understatement. It was late November, like, and what's going by? He didn't want to be there, but he still went sky high and caught the first ball about 3 foot over my head. Like. But yeah, there was memorable days, great crack as well.
I like that idea, a sociable Teddy McCarthy with no interest in playing.
He hadn't any great interest in the overall occasion on the day.
Who springs into your mind, Conor? For me now, it would be the likes of the Rock, who be quite happy to kind of stand in one place and greet what came at him.
Oh, interesting. For some reason, John Carroll is coming into my mind. I don't know. He strikes me like he would be the right stuff for what you're talking about in terms of winter hurling. I'm interested. I don't know if Dalo is calling for groundsmen to be fired before the next season. I don't know. Maybe that's the solution.
I think he just wants an optional club ground for the winter months.
Yeah, Joe Rabbit was another one I can remember. He'd be up for it as he would in July, like, you know, he'd be going hard and you might be feeling a bit tender on yourself. Jeez. It eventually led to violence breaking out.
Galway were a good league team in that era anyway, because they couldn't play again until August anyway. But
Sean Tracy, like, as well, up the other end. I didn't I remember Damien Byrne as well from Waterford, and someone got the bright idea in Waterford to make Damien Byrne into a forward at one stage, and it was a bit of a nightmare if you were in the Clare full back line, to be honest. In the early 90s, he was, oh God, you'd get in close to him anyway, because staying out was a recipe for 6 or 7 stitches to get in under him.
Cork men, obviously, Rory, not a league team, no interest in playing hurling in the winter.
No, always summer hurling is what Cork hurling is generally associated with. But I am reminded of a really good friend of mine who was, he was a junior hurler, and they got to the Southeast, it's the Carrickdown division. They got to the Southeast junior final, and he was on to me for ages, and he said, look, come down, it's a big game, you know, there's going to be a big crowd. So I said, look, I drove down all the way down from Dublin, and when I got down, the match was down in Tracton or one of these places, you know, off out the beaten end. Oh, it was horrific. I mean, the weather was atrocious, like bucketing down, freezing cold, howling winds. You know, you're nearly out in the sea. And there was a lively enough crowd there. But I always remember the ball went into the full back line, and it did not come out for about, I'd say about 8 or 9 minutes. It just, right? It was about 8 or 9 minutes it was in there. And when it eventually came out, there was a cheer. There was a cheer around the ground. Yay, you know, like, and to me, it was the epitome of winter hurling. And it was just like, listen, I think fellas that go out there and put it on. And the funny thing, given that we were going to discuss it, I actually had a look at Laois versus Tipperary in full last night. And my God, the conditions that match was played in. It's funny when I watched it back and realized, like, and actually the quality was pretty high from both teams, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think the whole notion of winter hurling has shifted because the seasons have shifted. And one other thing that I think is worth bearing in mind as well, actually, lads, is my father was buried on the 10th of May last year, God rest him, right? And the funeral, and I remember this distinctly, obviously, as you would when your father's buried, the funeral was on the 10th of May, and it was howling winds, freezing cold, lashing rain, sleet, nearly snow. And the championship is starting on the 16th of April. So there's no guarantees we're going to get the sort of silky conditions that we may have been used to in the past in the championship either.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the reasons it occurred to me, because you look at it and, like, I was looking through those old fixtures and I was getting a bit of a laugh out of it. But like that one where Limerick scored 8 points to Tipperary's 224, Dalo, that was March, you know, like we don't live in a country where the summer stretches for months on months. Like, we think June, July and August, and we always get freakish weather in September to suit where the All-Ireland used to be. It's a fact of the matter that, you know, the fabled Munster Championship, a lot of it's going to be played in April now and early May, and it is going to slightly change matters, isn't it?
I think
it is, yeah. You could have wind and rain. I know, like, just looking at it from a Clare point of view, like, we know that now that Cork have seen Ed Sheeran as more important than the Munster Championship, that we play two in Thurles, two in Ennis, so we're fairly guaranteed good surfaces anyway. You know, Ennis is right up there now with the surface, so in that sense. But you could have a terrible day, and I actually used to hate April, because usually just January, February, March you were slogging in the training, but in April you really had to start doing a lot of hurling training, and your fingers would be getting belts and they'd be frozen, and you know, so yeah, I think teams will be looking at this league and saying it might be crucial practice for what lies ahead in the Munster and Leinster Championships.
There's only 3 hurling matches going to be played in July, 3 inter-county hurling championship matches played in July, and none in August.
Yeah. It is kind of mad when you think about it. Do you think it suits anybody in particular? Conor, you'd be thinking the more physical teams, your beloved Galway, Limerick, are these the teams that will be more suited to a spring/early summer championship?
I suspect so, yeah. I mean, you'd imagine. I mean, I'm not sure the weather will be so bad that, Cork can be counted out or teams like that. I mean, Kilkenny always struck me as a team who were very suited to those kind of winter conditions. Now, I know that it's different this year because
summer usually.
And summer, yeah. But, I mean, they could play it anyway, but in particular, they were very physical and very good at sort of rucks and ruck ball and that type of stuff. They're obviously a bit neutered in this league, or early in the league at least, because of the Ballyhale contingent, which they're so reliant on. I do think that there's a lot of nostalgia around the place for these type of low-scoring games. I think it started kind of during the 2018 season, which was a tremendous season in lots of ways, but the idea had begun to be floated that scoring had become far too easy. It was getting out of hand a bit, balls zinging over the bar.
Conor, would you think the weather had a lot to play with that 2018 possibly, season? Yeah. You're spot on there, actually, that the 2018 season was arguably the best championship that we've had for many, many years, right? But if that was a fantastic summer weather-wise, so do you think that boosted the quality of play that we saw?
Possibly. I hadn't considered that, but it's definitely something to think about in terms of it was a bit like watching tennis at times. I remember around the time of the semi-finals, Galway Clare and Cork Limerick on the one weekend. First one a draw, Limerick won an extra time in the replay or in the second game. The notion had come that it was a bit like watching tennis with your head sort of going this way and that, and it was the notion that the ease with which long range points were being taken was clipping some of the dimensions out of hurling. The contests, goals weren't really being worked anymore. I mean, in 2020, Limerick decided they didn't require goals at all to win the All-Ireland. And, it is something to think about in terms of, you do wonder sometimes whether when hurling was being designed, they had this notion that you'd be able to take a point from such distance. It does feel like a sort of perversion of the original vision of hurling, and it's clipping some of the elements of hurling out of the game, which I think is why people, there was such a refreshing nostalgia around the place after the Wexford Limerick game at the weekend.
Yeah, I think if every game played out 1-11 to 11 points,
people would get tired of it quickly.
I think Dalo might be happy, but others might be wondering, where's the long distance shooting?
Dalo and Jackie would be delighted.
Yeah, I must say, 2017, when Wexford beat Limerick 1-14 to 14 points, Limerick did score 12 goals between their next 2 games against Laois and Kerry. So there might also be something that, I think the spring weather does allow itself for a few more goals. Dalo, maybe it's just balls dropping short, because the slitter's a bit heavier, so you get more kind of goal mouth action, which is one thing everybody loves in hurling, is a good scramble around the goal mouth. So swings and roundabouts.
That's it. I'd say, while we're all kind of saying that John Kiley probably wasn't too concerned coming home in the bus last Sunday evening, he probably would be still thinking that, Conor McDonald had 2 more great goal chances along with the goal they got, and Limerick, really, we couldn't think of a goal chance, a real quality one anyway. So that maybe the inside line is a little area of concern, and probably will see Shamie Flanagan maybe starting there on Saturday night, I'd imagine.
Yeah, looking at that game, then it's a very interesting one. Obviously, it's the pick of the games. It's live on the telly. It's also, funnily, it's going to be there's going to be a huge crowd, Rory, in the Gaelic grounds, because Limerick haven't really had a chance to kind of salute this all-conquering team in large numbers, and we've been seeing the crowds that have been coming out to matches because they're able to, you're getting huge crowds, like a sellout in Armagh for the football last week, etc. So you're probably going to have upwards of 25,000-30,000 people in the Gaelic grounds on Saturday evening, weather permitting. It's going to lend itself a proper championship atmosphere.
It should. We do have to remember as well, rugby is quite popular down that neck of the woods, so that could have an effect. And then the weather, as we say, and I certainly would expect the Mackie stand to be full. and a good clatter of people on the far side, and it should make for a very good atmosphere. And it's going to tell us a lot. I think it'll tell us a lot more about Limerick, maybe in terms of where they're at. I mean, it's very hard to put a gauge on them. I'd be very interested in Dalo's view on this. How much have they done, Dalo? How much work would they have done, Limerick, at this stage, would you think? And obviously, they're slightly interrupted as well. Look, they were on All-Stars. They won they did a massive All-Stars. They did a big winter. They went on hop trips and holidays, and they were in Dubai, and they were in America, and all these types of things. And then obviously they have a huge number of lads playing Fitzgibbon, including the best hurler in the country, you know, who's tied up with NUI Galway. So, I mean, like collectively, training wise, what kind of numbers would they have? How much strength and conditioning work or fitness work would they have done? Are they a little bit behind everybody else, would we think, Dalo?
I'd say so, Rory. It's very hard to know. Obviously, the modern player, while he might go on the holiday, I'd say he still visits the gym maybe 5 times in that week, or maybe 10 times in that fortnight if they're away. That's the kind of way it is now. Yeah, the interesting dynamic here, I think you look at it, he hasn't really in the Munster League and in the first round of the league, he didn't really push his Fitzgibbon players to play. You know, he said they have a match Wednesday. Whereas with Galway, you see Evan Island clipping 14 points last night. He'll probably play Saturday night, and even though they have a big Galway semi-final next week, you'll probably still see him playing. We'll see a few more of the NUIG guys. Interestingly, Brian Concannon got injured on last Sunday to go off after 20 minutes, and he missed the quarter-final of the Fitz last night. So whether he'll be back fit, will Henry care too much about how NUIG fare out, you know? Does he need to keep the winning streak going? But I think Kylie will. I think you'll see, look, they were good at the back. Right? 111 is good, very good. Nicky was brilliant, obviously, with 2 great saves. And I mean, Richie English, they didn't have Sean Finn, and they probably don't need to play him. So good was Barry Nash, Dan, and Richie English. So half back line was solid, I'd say. Will he? I think the more you're looking at it now, and I've been touting this maybe for a couple of years, but could we see Kyle Hayes reappearing at 11 again?
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I know they have Keane and they have, but could he reappear somewhere in the half-forward line, and maybe with Hago going full? Or Hago was really the only forward that functioned last week, you could have to say. 18 wides again, Rory, that would tell you the very same as what they had in Ennis, albeit that was an easy success in the Munster League final. So that's an area now, I'd say. But I'd say overall, he wouldn't have been happy with the attitude. Now, he reminds me of Lucknan a little bit, John Kiley, that he mightn't have pushed too many buttons before they went to Wexford. Darry Egan probably had all his buttons pushed in terms of a good start. And he might push a few buttons this week, though, that was not good enough. And fellas are talking about, I deserve a chance here, and you got a chance, you didn't take it. Might give you one more now on Saturday night, but you better stand up to the level. So I'd say that you could see a backlash from Limerick on Saturday evening, and in front of that, I'd say there'd be a massive turnout for them. Rugby and more rugby, crowd. I think they have established a huge, you know.
And they have a very loyal following. They always have a good following.
Yeah,
in fairness, they have a very good following. Even in the bad times,
that's
Limerick have had a great following.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. That's an interesting idea Dalo's thrown out there, Connor. Kyle Hayes going back into the fours. When you think about it, they're blessed with an awful lot of very powerful halfbacks, and they've got a surplus of full back line players now who could possibly be moved forward as well. So you've got one of the best athletes in the game there. You don't have to play him at 7. You're not married to playing him at 7, and we all know he can play 11, and I'm sure he could play anywhere across that half forward line.
He did get man of the match in the 2018 All-Ireland final centre forward, wasn't it? So he has operated there. Now, I thought he was even better when he stepped back to wing back, because he really was able to go on those galloping runs, and it, we saw it in the Munster final last year, that goal. But we've seen it plenty. We see it plenty of times. The one thing that always strikes me about Kyle Hayes is, I mean, every time he seems to barge into a ruck, Limerick win the ball almost immediately. I mean, it seems to come back on the Limerick side within seconds. So he's able to do almost everything. Personally, I quite liked him at wing back, because he seemed to have the space to really get up ahead of steam. But certainly they have ample room to maneuver in terms of the athletes they have and their versatility. I mean, Declan Hannon seems strange to remember he was a forward once upon a time. You know, he's now the archetypal playmaker centre back there. So you know they can move flip players between half back and half forward. There's no problem. Sort of almost reminiscent of you see Tyrone in football. They're almost interchangeable.
I think Conor, Mike Casey is almost, you know, he's fully fit. He's taking part in all the matches in training. So Trini Mackett, go back to 18 again. Mikey Casey, how crucial was he at fullback back then? So the options at the back are huge. So maybe with Peter Casey out of the equation up top, it might be, looking at something like that. But you look at, imagine Gallen this week in training. Like, and we all know how good Gallen is. Like, what a player! Like, I mean, he'll be stinging at training this week, and he'll start, I'd say, Saturday night, and you could see a kickback from him and Shamey and himself. Maybe two absolutely new players. Oisín O'Reilly could start. You know who else would start up there, but yeah, I have a feeling there'll be a kickback off them. Galway will be delighted with the amount of goals they scored and how impressive they were. So they might also have, maybe a couple of the Thomas's lads might come back into play there for them, because they got a little break. I think, they got a week off, but they were back in training straight away then, and obviously rested them last weekend. So one or two of them, and then maybe Fenton Burke or something like that, David Burke even might come into play.
It's still hard to gauge with Galway. I mean, I was at the Walsh Cup game against Dublin. Now it was a small bit disquieting. I mean, it's hard to know what to read into the Walsh Cup. But the manner of the defeat was because they did bring on the Manions at halftime, and it didn't really improve. Now, you don't know where these players are at. The game was a complete wipeout. The most memorable moment from the game was when the poor umpire managed to wave the green flag when the ball clearly went into the side netting, which the entire stadium fell about laughing.
That's always great crack.
And Sean Clear walked in very slowly to him. So he left it stew. He left the laughter gather and reach a full crescendo. Both Dublin and Galway supporters laughed. It showed how low stakes the game was.
I was about to say, that tells you what you should think of the Walsh Cup, really.
Yeah. So, they were better the last day. They appeared in rude health. I mean, again, it's hard to know because Offaly are just feeling their way back to this level, and they're still way off it. They're in the Joe McDonough, obviously, this year. So Galway scored 4 goals, could have had 8. There was talk of transition. Maybe we could cool that a bit because, Conor Whelan is still in the prime of his career, and he's going to be a big player, I suspect, for them in the next couple of years in terms of his abilities as a target man, as a scorer, and a creator in particular. And they also have the Fitzgibbon contingent to come in. The All Galway semi-final come up, and Evan Nyland looks set to step up to be one of the key marksmen in the attack.
And Concannon, I'd say, whether he plays or not now Saturday night, Conor, but I'd say Brian Concannon is really looking like he's found the level at this, like Nyland, that they found their feet at this level. So, and Colin Mannion, obviously,
he was taken off against Offaly after.
He was injured, Rory.
I was going to ask. I presume that was an injury. Was it?
Yeah, he didn't play last night at all for NUIG. So
he came off after 19 minutes, I think.
17 or 18 minutes. Yeah.
He Rory, there's no doubt in the talent of these lads, and we've been championing them for a few years. I guess what's different now is Joe Canning isn't there, and everything's being assessed now in a post Joe Canning world. You're no longer trying to play alongside Joe Canning. There's this temptation now among Galway fans to probably anoint a new Joe Canning, which is probably not a very helpful thing to do. You have to kind of, get over the fact Joe Canning is gone and realise this is no longer a team that has or necessarily needs a Joe Canning. It's an entirely new dynamic.
I think so, and I think that might actually be a little bit of a weight in one sense, lifted off a few shoulders. If you're a young lad kind of coming through, of course you would want somebody of the stature, presence, the contribution that he's made to the game, the caliber of player that he is. You would obviously want him in the dressing room alongside you, but at the same time, when he does go, it does create a vacuum. That vacuum will need to be filled in terms of leadership, responsibility, lads being prepared to step up now in his absence. And I think that can actually bring players on to a certain extent. You could see some of the younger players that may have been, slightly reticent about, kind of grabbing hold of this team, really come to the fore over the next couple of weeks. And they do have still the bones of a very, very good side of the team. There's still lots of experience. There's still the Manions. Pádraig is still playing superb stuff. You've got the Joe Cooney. You have, obviously, a few of the lads to come back in. as Dalo said, in relation to the college lads and the St. Thomas's guys. So I don't know. I mean, like, it's probably a year where Galway might be given a pass in terms of a transition from COVID / Joe Canning / whatever went before to the new Henry Shefflin era while he finds his feet. But you just don't know what opportunities might present themselves with. And if they can go out on Saturday night and put in a really good spirited performance and even, you know, who knows, maybe even sneak a win, imagine what that would do for their confidence.
Jesus,
I don't want to float a Ewing theory in relation to Canning. You know, the theory that the Knicks were better without Reggie Ewing. Patrick Ewing, wasn't it? Not Reggie. But well, they have dealt without Joe Canning before. I mean, they won in Nolan Park in 2019 without him. And when he came off against Limerick in the 2020 semi-final, they weren't weakened substantially. I mean, Nyland came on and hit 2 great points from play. So sometimes when a player, a big marquee player departs, it can give space for the other lads to flourish. Galway, I mean, I think their issues are more around the middle. I mean, Garage McInerney scored a great galloping goal the last day. I mean, I had a fear that he was becoming a problem for them in that position, and he kind of lost the totemic form of 2017, and he was being a bit exposed and sort of balls out wide and so forth. I know they'd moved him to full back and they'd experimented with Dahi Burke at centre back, but their problems are around that middle third. Carl Mannion, I know, is slotted back into midfield. He can be very hot and cold. Like he's either brilliant or he can really struggle in games. So they have an issue there, I think. Which
what you'd probably
I wouldn't mind
see,
if he was. I wouldn't mind if he was down the road 40 or 50 miles.
Take him.
What you might see, though, I think to a certain extent, and this was something that I noticed. Now, look, it's very obviously it's a different kettle of fish when you're dealing with club level, but it's a very Kilkenny thing anyway, is to plant big blocks, big pillars in terms of when you're building your house right down the spine and the middle of the team. They will plant, you know, big leaders, big players at 3, 6, 8, 9, 11 and 14. And I probably see Henry kind of doing something similar in that'll give him, you know, a really good solid base and make them extremely difficult to beat. And that'll be their first start. That'll be their starting point. And if they can flesh that out, then
they have an awful lot of options in that.
They do. They do.
Like Fintan Burke was absolutely superb for Thomas's at 3. Shane Cooney obviously then was a huge loss for Thomas's at 6. He was an option. I'd say Gerard McInerney, Conor, I'd say, yeah, I thought he was fading as well, to be honest. But I'd say Henry Shefflin being announced as coming back would get you to the gym 2 mornings earlier and say, my God, I'm going to get this one.
I'm going to show this fella.
You know,
he's good on heavy ground anyway, we know that.
Well, like Pádraig Mannion, you know, can play there as well. And there's fierce options like around the place there. So, yeah, whatever he settles on will be very interesting. And they have some amount of players, lads. I mean, how many minors did they win? 4 Ireland minors in a row?
5.
4,
like,
yeah.
5?
5 and 6.
Yeah, and beaten in the 6th one, was it?
2015.
Yeah, and like, you only look at the Fitz semi-final next week, like NUIG are operating with an exclusively Galway team, except for Keane and Tipp lad Connor forward, name just won't come to me now, it's like 13, and all the subs that come on are Galway. And the IT are exclusively Galway. I don't think there's anyone from anywhere else. Might be one Offaly lad, maybe, I think. So it'll tell you the amount of quality players that are in the county. It's just maybe settling on that best 24 or 5 and getting them playing regularly together and getting the patterns right.
You get the impression,
Shefflin.
Yeah, Shefflin, Rory mentioned there, you know, kind of it's a free hit. Everything we know about Henry Shefflin's career, he doesn't strike me, Dalo, as the kind of man who'd look for a fallow year, or he'd kind of like say, I will be grand, we don't have to win anything this year. That would just run contrary to anything I've ever heard, read or thought of Henry Shefflin.
100%, Mikey, couldn't say it better. Like that, while that would be out there, that, you know, there has to be transition and new guys have to come into play. I think Shefflin will have weighed up this before he went, that there's enough players there to.
When he came into TV, Dalo, he wanted to be the best TV analyst.
Yeah,
I'm going to show that Cusack fella now. He just wants to be the best at everything.
I thought I was the standard bearer there, not Donald.
Yeah, that was a tremendous slap in the face for Dalo.
It's the Cork thing, you know. We have to. It's Corkness.
A very clean-shaven Dalo as well. That slap, he really felt it. We'll move on, lads. Rory, you said you watched all of Tipperary versus Laois, so you are better placed than nearly anyone to tell us how Colin Bonner's ill-starred reign is getting going.
That's the main reason that I watched. Like, there's some mutterings coming out that, you know, things may not be as. But there might be, you know, a few issues in Tipperary, probably exacerbated somewhat, obviously, with the departures of the two Mahers, namely Pádraig and Brendan, like, for obvious reasons, one retiring by choice, the other retiring because of necessity. And they're massive leaders and massive guys to go. So I watched it. Now, look, it was against Laois, who were actually really excellent as well, to be fair. And I can tell you, they will give teams socks of it. Below in O'Moore Park, especially, they are not a bad side at all. But I was curious about Tipperary, and like, they're trying to do all of the right things. You can see in the modern game, and this was in the howlings of rain, lashings of rain, howlings of wind. You know, they're into the wind in the first half, and they're still working the ball around the backs. You know, so they were playing short puck outs, looking for that extra pop pass, not afraid to go backwards, to go forwards, then, you know, releasing it long into inside men, which they still have some very, very dangerous players in there, in the likes of Jason Ford and Jake Morris, and invariably would pick up scores. But then they're able to marry a lot of that with the traditional silky skills that we would always associate with Tipperary hurling. They look in reasonably good physical shape, in fairness to them, given the weather that played out. And I was looking at the team that finished 12 of the team that finished the game against Laois played in the All-Ireland final of 2019 when they won, and the last time they were All-Ireland champions. Now, people might say, okay, that's 3 years ago, and they've moved on, and a lot of these players are slightly more mature, and they are. And obviously, Shamie Cal has probably more hurling behind him now than ahead of him, certainly at intercounty level. But I was kind of pleasantly surprised, and I would think Kilkenny, you need to be on their guard going into this game on Sunday, because I don't think Tipperary are in as bad a shape as some of the soundings would have you believe.
Yeah, wishful thinking, Dalo, from outside, from some people, I would imagine. But I suppose there was an impression anyway that their first two choices as manager are probably below in Waterford and Wexford now, which is difficult for Colin Bonner, who, let's be fair, he probably would have thought if he was going to get the Tipperary job, he might have got it 15 years ago or 10 years ago. You know, things work out in a funny kind of manner. So I guess the probably positivity levels weren't as high, and confidence levels, which are never usually lacking in Tipperary, may actually be quite low, which is just tough for Bonner, I suppose, because he needs to get buy-in from everybody now as well, because he is rebuilding.
They have a brilliant coach as well.
Holding on to Tommy Dunn was crucial for me, Mikey, that, you know, Tommy decided he'd stay on from the Liam Sheedy 3 years and work with Cullum. So for me, that was, you know, a massive statement that Tommy felt the squad was there. I know Tommy very well, and he'd have walked, I'd say, if he thought the things. And the thing with Cullum as well, while he mightn't be as young as some of the managers would say, like Derry Egan now and these guys kicking in, he's been involved in the colleges scene so extensively, of course, with Waterford IT. So he'd be very familiar with modern training methods. And there's no better coach than Tommy as well. Like, you know, so they won't lack from that front. If I was a Tip player, I'd be quite happy with that management. I think maybe, okay, Liam Cahill was the obvious thing we probably thought. But no, look, I think there's exciting young players there. Maybe they didn't see as much game time as I would have thought in the last couple of years. I'm talking about the likes of who played well now, and I watched a nice bit of the Laois game as well, or I didn't see every bit of it now. But like Craig Morgan from Kilruan now,
it was hard to see.
Hard to see. Dylan Quirk seemed to have a good game, and then Jake Morris, as you mentioned, Rory, but also Mark Keogh, and they'd have been shocked to go out of the fits the way they did UCC against Carlow on Tuesday night. But Mark Keogh was still the best man I think they had. and he was brilliant for them right through the campaign for UCC. So, like Ronan being named manager as well, I think that he'd be rallying the troops. Mikey Breen played well, Barry Heffernan. So you have plenty of experience. Yeah, I'd say, it's very interesting one. I probably fancy tipping it. But of course, you have Cody saying very, very average Kilkenny last week. So probably a sting in them as well. You'll probably see Murph back in goal. The three Ballyhale lads up front, I suppose, and even if Colin Finlay was available, would there be four of them would walk into the forward line at the minute. So they're down a lot. Hugh Lawler at centre back is an interesting one, well able to play out there, I'd say. So yeah, it's more we'll know about Tipp than Kilkenny for Sunday, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's strangely a little bit off Broadway feeling to this one, Conor, isn't there? Given that these are the two teams that absolutely dominated hurling for what felt like it was a little under a decade, but it was probably about a decade, and like nobody could see past them. A league meeting between them at this time of the year 4 or 5 years ago still was the only ticket in town, and it's not that the fixture's being ignored now, but people are certainly looking more towards Limerick v Galway as a game of match between possible contenders.
Yeah, there were some thrillers back in the day. I remember a particularly high-scoring one in 2014, I believe, which Kilkenny won out in, as they tended to do usually in the league. Cody never really took the foot off. He was win the next game philosophy seemed to be his approach. On Tipperary, I mean, obviously the mood music is a bit dreary with them this year in terms of the absentees leaving. Their loss in the Munster League to Kerry kind of caught someone's eyes. Again, the caveat that this is a pre-season competition. I'd be very reluctant to read too much into beating Laois by 4 points, or only beating Laois by 4 points as people would traditionally have seen it. I mean, we've seen in the past that Laois have caused serious problems for teams who, were in rude health, as it turned out. I mean, look at Waterford last year. They were in trouble against Laois quite late in the game. I think they were actually behind with 10 minutes left. Mm-hmm. And, the instinct of people traditionally would be to say, if you're only beating Laois by that much, you're in serious trouble. And then they went and beat Galway and Tipperary over subsequent weeks. Even the year before, in 2020, Clare won by a point, I think, against Laois in Nolan Park. Now, they had David McInerney sent off, I think, in the first half. And then the following week, Clare beat Wexford easily. And I do recall Brian Lohan making a point after the Wexford game to say that, this notion, the criticism they received after the Laois game was unwarranted. It didn't take into account how difficult Laois were to play and how well they moved the ball. So, I mean, I think any sort of win in Laois is a decent win these days. And I think, again, it's two teams in a kind of an odd situation. Kilkenny missing a lot of their players, made heavy enough weather of Antrim, I suppose, again, and Antrim quite up for the game, and they tend to start these leagues well, as we saw last year beating Clare. On balance, I mean, with home advantage, I think I'd give the nod to Tipperary, given how depleted Kilkenny are in the forward line and how dependent they are on the Ballyhale contingent. So, but it'll be interesting to see how the teams line up with each other and where they're obviously, as you say, the Limerick Galway game is attracting most headline attention.
Yeah, well, actually, we will move to the club game now, lads. We'll finish up soon, but it would be remiss of us not to mention that club final between Ballyhale and Ballygunner, a proper local rivalry, interprovincial local rivalry. Dalo, it was interesting. I saw that the PR people had the gumption, the wherewithal to stick out Colin Fennelly and Stephen O'Keefe as the media people, as the interviewees this week, which was interesting because they're two lads who recently packed in inter-county hurling and now seem very, very happy with their choice playing club hurling. They're both their quotes could have been interchanged. It was like, you do as much training with the club as you do, but there's slightly less pressure. You've a bit more free time, and it was a great advertisement for the club game. You got close, obviously. 97, wasn't it? Burr beat you in the semi-final. It does. Those of us who've never been involved can kind of poo-poo on it and say, look, it's a match between two parishes, etc., etc. But it is something very special to win it. And Ballygunner having such dominance for so long in Waterford, they'll be desperate to add one of these national crowns.
First Waterford team.
Yeah. And for me, by 3 miles, it's the biggest game of the weekend in hurling terms. It's not Ireland final, it's championship, and I mean, these guys, every guy that you'll talk to that are playing intercounty at the weekend will speak about going back and trying to win a championship with the club. And yeah, it's huge. And the Gunners have been so good for so long. Go back over the years, fellas like Hartley, Flinner, Billy Sullivan, great players. We would have played them that year. We got out of Munster. We won Munster. We played them in an epic semi-final down in Thurles. A great side as well. And so, yeah, it would have suited both managers to put the two of those guys out there as well, Mikey. They're well experienced. You're not putting any pressure on any of the younger fellas as well. So I just think that the pendulum has moved towards Ballygunner's favour. I just think, I could be wrong. You'd nearly want to be bringing the cup in the gate of McGinn Park in Ballygunner to be sure you'd this Ballyhale team bait, because we saw the defiance the last day. But I just think overall, good in Kilkenny, I suppose. But then, so lucky to beat Rhinos, let's face it. So lucky to get extra time. Struggled against Mount Leinster as well. I mean, I think the Laois lads, Clough-Ballacalla, got caught in the headlights a bit, and obviously the last day were hurled off the field in lots of ways, but still came up. They did take over the match with 15 minutes to go, you have to say, and they were returning Thomas's puck outs nearly every time. And then TJ came up with the two bits of magic, obviously, for the penalty. And
Dalo, I want your opinion on that free, because I watched it and it's amazing. He hits it so hard you can't even see where the ball goes. But why weren't there 10 Thomas's players on the line? Why were they spread out all across the area?
I'd say.
Well, maybe they hadn't planned enough for the situation, but what really happened was Colin Findlay with a huge amount in getting the penalty as well. Now there's a kind of a 50-50 split whether he deserved the penalty or whether it was a free out initially. But I was of the opinion maybe free out. But you watch Colin Findlay while the penalty has been hitting. There's a great reverse angle that was going around from the stand. He walks across in front of the keeper, and Mikey, I gave a lifetime of listening to Davy Fitz, 12 or 13 years anyway, and he roaring, "Get him out of my eye line," when it was 21, and Lohan would genuinely lift anyone out of Davy's eye line. And if you watch the last second as TJ's about to hit it, the goalie runs out, because he can't see with Findlay. He runs out around Findlay and he gets in front of Findlay. So therefore, at that stage, then he's nearly as near to TJ as he was for the penalty. So when TJ beats the goalie then with the shot, the lads in the line are blinded, absolutely blinded. And the two boys knew what they're at, and they're terrible twins, of course, TJ and Colin Findlay, and have been doing it for so long. I just feel the Gunners, with the way Desi Hutchinson is playing, lads, and the space that's creating for the likes of Peter Hogan, Billy O'Keefe, the Mahonys, midfield is intriguing for me. I just think Levy and Sheehan are playing brilliant stuff all year for the Gunners, and if Ronan Corcoran is still out, lads, he's a top player. There's huge doubts about Darren Mullen as well. And I thought Darren Mullen was the man they would be picking up, because he went off injured in the semi-final, that he'd be picking up Desi. So I just think overall in Croke Park, and if you look at where Ballygunner played their best hurling, they were very poor in a bottomless Dungarvan against Lochmore. They were brilliant up in Cusack Park, which was like July against Ballyea. They were brilliant in Páirc Uí Chaoimh against Kilmallock. They struggled. They beat the last day against Loughneel and Parnell, but now they're going into Croker again. So bit of a contradiction. Maybe I'm talking 6 of one half, because Ballyhale have been so good in Croker as well. But I just think now that they're at the very peak of their powers, the Gunners. And am I going to be shocked if Ballyhale come up with, if TJ gets 3-3 or something? I won't be. But I think they have the more balance now, and I think they'll bring it home with them.
Yeah, they lost out a couple of years ago in a semi-final to Ballyhale, Conor, and Stephen O'Keefe was kind of ruining a couple of missed goal chances. That does seem to be the difference now, that in Desi Hutchinson coming back, they aren't missing too many goal chances. They've got a lethal inside forward line, and that could be the difference, because when you've got TJ Reid and Colin Fennelly at the other end, the goal chances are going to be taken up there. So you have to be raising green flags, I would imagine, to win this game.
Yeah, on form, they look to have the edge. I mean, it feels like heresy, as Dalo says, to back against Ballyhale Shamrocks, and you're kind of asking for a smack almost. But with the exception of the Leinster final, they've been in survival mode in the last while. I mean, it should have been beaten by Rhinos, and then should have been beaten by Thomas's. So on form, you'd have to tip Ballygunner. They blitzed people in Munster, except Lochmore, Castleiney, but they're hugely impressive in the Munster final. I mean, after a sluggish start, they completely ripped Kilmallock apart. Desi Hutchinson looks like one of the best forwards in the country on form at this point. So reluctantly, I give the nod to Ballygunner. It'll be a breakthrough for Waterford as well, because they've never had a club champion before. I do recall De La Salle, or John Milan's De La Salle, as we're obliged to call them, reaching the final in the late noughties, but that happened to coincide with Portumna's peak, so they were very badly beaten at that point. But it will be a big, landmark for Ballygunner if they can do it.
Yeah, we lost Rory there. He's had to slip off. He's enigmatically gone, and Dalo left too, but he's come back. He's a pro. He's like,
my points were so uninsightful. They had to just part the call for him.
Sorry, Conor. Sorry. Who'd you go for, Conor? Who'd you go for?
I've echoed you. I've given the nod to Ballygunner. I said it's heresy, and I'm just asking for a backlash.
Yeah, same as that.
I'm a bet down Wexford cur who never bets against the Kilkenny team, so I'm going to say Ballyhale.
But it is. I believe it's the case that Waterford might be the only serious hurling county, as we call it, not to have a club champion. So it will be a landmark if Ballygunner do it.
Will be a big boost for the overall Waterford thing as well, won't it?
Yeah, certainly will.
Hugely. And I think they are on form the second best team in the country, or they've shown it in the last.
Yeah.
If they win.
It's a big it'll be a big battle won as well in that disputed Ferrybank border territory dispute as well. All right, thank you for coming back, Dalo. You've come back to say goodbye, basically. I think we've everything covered.
We'll be welcome for you in Ennis, Mikey, on Sunday as well. I'll be making my way over to that. I'm in the Gaelic ground Saturday night, so I'm looking forward to getting over. And Clarecastle senior training has been brought forward to 11 o'clock to suit me to get to the park then, and good time.
That nice.
I go over to the far side with the Great Unwashed again and try and rouse it up from the team we got in Parky Keeve.
I can't believe we didn't fixate
the team at the moment, Wexford.
I can't believe we didn't fixate on Clare Wexford again. I mean, the narrative obviously isn't as strong these days.
No, he's avoiding all that, Conor. He's avoiding all that.
Look, Wexford got discussed well on Monday. There should be no close contact issues either, so we should be all right.
Compensating now.
Yeah. Anyway, lads, we'll catch up on that game next week. Thank you very much for joining, and we will chat to you all next week. Goodbye.
Okay, lads.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.